You open this door with the key of reason. Beyond it is another dimension. A dimension of truth. A dimension of freedom. A dimension of joy. You're moving into the land of both the ideal and the real, of the possible and the actual. You've just crossed over into the Capitalist Corner.
Where reason meets reality, welcome to the Capitalist Corner.
Folks, where reason meets reality, I am the host of the Capitalist Corner, Mark Pellegrino, and also the chairman of the American Capitalist Party. Soon to have our convention, our national convention in September. Also, my co-host and vice chair of the American Capitalist Party, Michael Liebowitz, who will be speaking there.
I will.
I'm really looking forward to that. But before you do any of that, Michael, you're at the helm of this Rational Alternative channel that has so many shows going on. Please keep us up to date.
Well, we're without one show, so we have lost the crime correction show. However, we now will be having the members only show for the members of our YouTube channel, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, Sundays. I will be there every Sunday, and perhaps once in a while, Mr. Pellegrino will deign to join us and bless us with his magnificent Luciferian presence.
Of course, I would do that. I hear something in your mic. I don't know if it's every time you're talking, it's a little whistle.
Okay, hold on. Is the whistling gone?
That sounds better. Did you hear a ding just now?
No, I didn't hear a ding.
Okay, thank God, because the cast of Supernatural we have a group text together, and they're all texting right now madly because one of our illustrious cast members, Matt Cohen, premiered his film yesterday with another of the cast members, Brianna Bruckmeister, and it's called X's. It was a fun movie to watch. I saw the premiere yesterday, so we're all doing the back and forth Hollywood thing. Hey, it was great. Nice to see you last night. Yada yada yada. It was fun. It was a fun movie though. Had a good time. It was great seeing everybody. I haven't seen everybody in a little while, so that was nice. Plus, one of the executive producers of Vought Rising was there, who's also directed multiple episodes. One of the editors from Vought Rising, which is a show that I did, the prequel to Boys, was there. So it was nice to see all those guys too.
I heard that. Did any of them ask about me?
As a matter of fact, you were the primary topic of conversation. They wanted to know what the fuck the rational alternative was, and they wanted to know how they could become members of the American Capitalist Party. That's super easy, guys. Go to americancapitalistparty.org. Donate, be a part of the change, and please do us a favor. Come to the National Convention. It's going to be in Pittsburgh, September 19th and 20th. There's going to be some great speakers there. It's going to be a great opportunity for you to get involved in the political process and start changing this bullshit that we're seeing out there, this duopoly between two statist alternatives that really leave us, the American people, at a loss.
Yeah, and let me tell you something. You might even get a chance to hang out with Mark and me. And let me tell you, there is no bigger hoot in the world than hanging out with us.
That's true. You want to party hard but sober and have a great time? It's going to be with me.
We might forget where we are and where we're going, but that's okay.
Hey, as long as we keep the fundamentals, that's all that matters. Keep the principles sound. You can forget everything else. Hey, Michael, but are we live streaming anywhere? We should do some reminders here for people because we want this channel to grow.
Okay, so we are live streaming right now on YouTube and on X, not on Twitch. Persephone wanted me to get in touch with her today to figure out how we can stream from Twitch, but I'm very, very busy, so I didn't have a chance to get in touch with her. We're going to figure it all out. Believe me, we will get this right. We will figure it out. We've got this. I've got Everyday Ethics today at 2:30. Like I said, remember Saturdays we have the weekend show. Mark and I have to start doing the other show on his Patreon again.
Self-Made Soul is going to be starting up pretty soon, guys.
Right.
I wanted to start it this Saturday.
In this Sunday, we can't do it this Saturday because I've already got a show scheduled for this Saturday.
Well, we can't do it this Saturday either because, one of my buds from the cast of Supernatural, Osric Chow, wants to do a little jiu-jitsu on Saturday. So I don't usually do jiu-jitsu on Saturday. I usually rest, but I'm going to go there just to roll with Osric. Right. Who, by the way, I just inside information. Osric's this little dude who was a stuntman and an actor who broke Jared Padalecki's arm in a wrestling match backstage during one of the conventions. Jared Padalecki is a monster of a human being. He's 6'5", 220. He's strong as a freaking bull. And Osric Chow climbed all over him like a spider monkey and fucked his world up. So I'm not looking forward to rolling with Osric. I told him to get me at the end of the day after he's exhausted. So we'll see how it goes.
Dude, that sounds like a movie, Rolling with Osric. Okay, but we got important stuff to talk about, Mark.
Super important stuff.
So get to it. Did you read everything I sent?
Most of the stuff, man. You send me a massive volume of stuff. I think I have to start waking up at 6 a.m. in order to prep myself for this show. 7 a.m. is not good enough. Thank you, Lee, for that £4.99. I like watching Mike struggle to read the amount when I super chat. It makes me giggle every time. For reference, it's £4.99. Okay, thank you very much. I think I sort of said it that way. And Lee, you have to get a passport and you can come to the American Capitalist Party, but you can't vote on any of the policies that we're going to be voting on at the convention. So you'd just be an observer, I guess. I don't know.
A conscientious observer.
You're more than welcome to. So, Michael, it's the big news over the last few days is that a deal has been struck with Iran. Of course, if you listen to Trump, the deal is done. It's really a memorandum of understanding at this point, which means nothing has been concluded. And it's basically what it I think amounts to in the end is an extension of the ceasefire and a removal of the embargo. And then discussions are going to start to ensue with respect to what's to be done with the Straits of Hormuz. Now, the Straits are supposed to be open by Friday, and it's supposed to be toll-free, but the Iranians are saying, no, we're going to charge a toll. Now, Michael, I don't know for sure, but I was pretty sure that before the war, there was no toll charged by Iran on the Straits of Hormuz, and now they're going to probably charge $1 million, $2 million per cargo hold for people to go through the Straits. Seems like a pretty stupid idea. Seems like a loss as far as negotiations are concerned. But this is supposed to happen, and then they're going to negotiate exactly in what way the Straits are supposed to be dealt with. They're going to negotiate down the line with J.D. Vance, by the way, not the Secretary of State, but J.D. Vance, how they're going to deal with the fissile material, the 900 pounds of fissile material that's out there, what they're going to do with respect to the Iranian nuclear program, which is still undecided, even though the American spin is that, they will never be allowed to have a nuclear a program that can create weapons grade material. This remains to be seen. And there's also compensation programs that are supposed to be down the line to the tune of $300 billion in compensation, which Trump claims is going to be paid by private corporations that are going to be investing in the rebuilding of Iran. I don't know what corporation would do that, Michael. I think it'll be as successful as his peace panel or whatever he tried to do in Gaza, which has zero funding at the moment. But what are your thoughts on this? Because to me, it's a big fat L. I hate to say it, but go ahead.
So unfortunately, we don't really know what's in it because they're not releasing it. Now, Trump has come out and he said that he's not only going to release it, he's going to read it live so that, the media can't misrepresent it. So the fact that they won't release it, to me, says a lot. Because if this was some kind of just they really stuck it to Iran and were in this really position of strength and set them straight, they would just put it out there. But they're not. And it's not like if they said, no, we're not putting anything out because we're waiting till it gets signed. But you have your your proxies, J.D. Vance, out there talking about what's in it. He says, no, that's not in it. No, that. So, ultimately we're going to have to wait and see. But clearly Trump is throwing Israel under the bus. There was a clip of him where he says they basically, they've got to stop going after Hezbollah. Enough is sometimes it's too much. There wouldn't be an Israel if it wasn't for us. So he's throwing them right under the bus. Now, I mean, let me just, be straight. I consider myself somewhat pro-Israel. Israel's not the most important issue in my head. Like there's things that I think are more important. But for the people who were really supporting Trump in this because of support for Israel, he's throwing them right under the bus. right
Yes.
under it.
Yeah, for sure. Now, Michael, I don't think this peace agreement, such as it is going to work out. I, of course, think that Iran is doing what it's been doing for the past 50 years, which is buying time. It's going to continue doing exactly what it does. JD Vance said in an interview that, provided they change their tune, provided they want a completely different regime, provided they want a different worldview, then we're going to go along with this. That's never going to happen. That's never going to happen. We're getting mixed messages with respect to what this regime is now. The hardliners are now not so hardline. They're actually malleable, but also we shouldn't listen to them because they're hardliners. But one of the main reasons this thing is going to fail, Michael, is because Iran has made it contingent upon the success of this agreement that Israel pulls out of Lebanon and stops attacking Hezbollah. That is not going to happen because Bibi Netanyahu's political life is literally on the line. That's one thing. The other thing is it is in Israel's favor to push Hezbollah completely out of the region, to completely annihilate them, because they are an existential threat to the existence of Israel. Michael, they just discovered in southern Lebanon a series of tunnels that were very much like what was going on in Gaza. And they uncovered plans for Hezbollah to do a similar type of invasion that Gaza did to the lower to southern Israel. The same kind of invasion, the same kind of apocalyptic citizen massacre that they committed on October 7th was planned in identical form for Hezbollah. So Bibi he's lost all his political cachet because he threw his hat in with Trump. I guess he misinterpreted the signals that were coming out from Iran and thought that Trump was going to be a lot stronger militarily than he was. And now his political life is on the line. And look, there's going to be no ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel. It can't happen. It can't.
Yeah, right. So Trump is saying that these Iranians are, I guess he said they're far more rational than the previous administration. And, he's saying things like that. And there's so many layers to this thing that, that I like. For one thing, the Iranians can't be trusted. Going back to the foundation of the revolution, the Ayatollah Khomeini basically said that, he said it, that preservation of the regime is more important than telling the truth. So if you have to lie to stay in power, that's what you're going to do. And they have a history of, saying things and doing the other thing, and that's what they do. And that's not to say that America never does that too, but I happen to be an American, and it's my country that's negotiating, and it's clear that you can't trust the other side. So you can't trust them to make deals. There was already a deal in place where there were actually inspectors going in that Trump ripped up. So I was thinking this morning again about this. Let me just back up a little bit. And I want to get into the Trump supporters as well. So I was thinking about this morning as I was reading through the material about the history of Iran and, all that. And I was thinking, could I support war with Iran? And I always have to bring the whole context back. Because it's true that the Iranian government are, they're savages, they're religious fanatics. That's all true. It's true that they hate America. It's true that they've, funded people that have attacked Americans, that sort of thing, took the hostages. But I bring back in my head, okay, but that's not enough to say we should go to war. So if you're going to go to war, right, there's a lot of countries throughout the world that are evil. And there's a lot of countries throughout the world that hate America. There's countries that have funded terrorism, that have spawned terrorism. Pakistan, just off the top of my head.
Saudi Arabia,
right.
Qatar.
Yeah. So when deciding to go to war, you have to decide, is the threat a legitimate threat to us? How serious of a threat is it? What kind of message do we send if we do nothing? In other words, in regards to deterrence of other countries, what is our capability? What is it going to cost us to go in and take them out? What are the actual objectives, right? You have to go through all those things. Now, I haven't done all that because I'm not a national security expert. I am skeptical, however, when the government tells us that war is necessary because they're known liars. But the fact that our government never even bothered to make that case to us is despicable. Now they're telling us, well, oh, we've humiliated the Iranians. We've beat them so badly. They were begging for a deal, which all seems to be bullshit, right? But one of the things that I'm finding really fascinating, and I always find it fascinating, there's like a mixture in me of a part that's fascinated, a part that's appalled, a part that thinks it's funny, is the people that follow Trump, or the people that have bought into his claims about this war. So, for instance, Trump told the New York Times, according to the New York Times, but it's been repeated by diehard Trump sycophants. It's been in the news and other outlets, and nobody has denied it, that Iran will be able to enrich for non-military purposes.
Yes.
Okay, so yesterday I said that here about the New York Times. So one guy comes on my feed and said, oh, you better have a better source than the New York Times. So the religion already steps in, right? Where you've already got your blocks to protect you from believing things you don't want to believe. So I told the guy, okay, so how long is it going to take to go from he didn't say it to it doesn't matter that he said it to no, it's actually a good thing that he said it? Because that seems to be the trajectory with these guys. My cousin steps in. My cousin comes on Facebook and tells me, oh, he wouldn't tell the New York Times. Okay, so you have no denial from Trump. The Times is reporting it. Other outlets are reporting it. But it's still, no, he couldn't have said that. And I told my cousin, when are you going to realize this guy does not know what the fuck he is doing? Like, it's that simple. But
never, Michael, never.
No, never. So you go online and there's within the conservative side of things, right? You have some conservatives, the hawks, who are very skeptical about this deal, and they're saying it out in the open.
Yes.
You have the never Trump conservatives like Jonah Goldberg and even Eric Erickson, who are talking about this deal is a disaster. But then you've got the Trump sycophants. You don't know what you're talking about. Trump beat them into submission, and they just won't stop with the ass kissing of Trump. Now back up to the supporters of just this war, the people who weren't supporters of Trump beforehand. Some of whom told me it doesn't matter who's president when you go to war, right? Doesn't matter. They're now mocking Trump and making fun of him for this horrible sellout, this capitulation, this surrender, with no mention of the fact that they previously supported him and said it didn't matter that he was the president. It's as if it never occurred, right? Mm-hmm. And that's why I say, it's okay to be wrong. Everybody is. I could not function like that. If I did something like that, like I'm still ashamed that I supported the war in Iraq. Right? Yeah. It's more than 2 decades ago, and I'm ashamed of it. I cannot imagine acting as if, one, it was a good idea, still sticking to that, or pretending as if it never occurred. But these are all the dynamics at work, and I find it, like I said, infuriating, fascinating, funny, all at once.
One of the reasons I don't want to get personally involved in politics, Michael, except on the outside fringes like I am here, but not run for office, is because precisely for this reason. There is no introspection in people who are affiliates of a party or party people, right? All they care about is their tribe winning the levers of power, and self-inspection, understanding what it is they might have done wrong to correct their behavior in the future is non-existent, and that's why we keep going around in this circle. I personally think that, yes, we decimated them militarily. We took out their regular army. We took out their navy. We took out much of their infrastructure. Even with hands tied, we destroyed them within seconds. We showed that Russian and Chinese anti-aircraft technology does not work against us. Like, we could just walk right through it like it's nothing. It's the politicians that have stolen defeat from the jaws of victory, man. It is these guys who have made this into a loss overall. Because if you think about it, Michael, now Iran has full control over the Straits of Hormuz that will be now justified by a legal document. Whereas before this necessarily wasn't the case and they didn't really exercise hands-on control over the Straits of Hormuz. Now they will. Now they're going to profit from it. There's a potential fund of $300 billion that they're claiming will be contingent upon their behavior. But this is for rebuilding Iran. Trump says it's not going to come out of the taxpayer pocket because it's going to be private industries who are going to be investing in this rebuilding process. What business in its right mind would invest in Iran with a regime controlled by the Republican guards who will lose control over their property, over their capital once it goes in there? Nobody in their right mind is going to invest in that, just like nobody in their right mind has invested in Gaza yet. Just like nobody in their right mind has actually invested in America yet, given Trump's chaotic policies. None of that stuff has come to pass. And now they're taking the embargo off. They're going to let trade happen under the supposed condition that Iran loosens up its chokehold on Hormuz. Michael, I'm skeptical that any of this is going to happen. They can use any pretense to stop this, and Trump is going to fall for it because all he sees right now is the midterm elections. All he sees right now is control of Congress. He doesn't give a shit what the long-term consequences of this terrible deal actually are.
Two questions I have for you, Mark. One is, do you think the fever will break? Two fevers that I'm talking about now. The one is just the overall MAGA. You got me saying MAGA. The overall MAGA. The MAGA fever of the people that are just blind to this dude. And also the people that still won't admit that it was a mistake to support the war. Do you think those fevers will break? And two, what is going to be the credibility of all of the people who were speaking up for these things?
Yeah, I know some MAGA people personally. There's some friends of mine, and they are reason resistant. I think there's always going to be a small portion of the population, maybe 10 to 20 million people, who will never ever change their perspective. Just, there are cults of personality in politics now, Michael. There's people that believe Franklin Delano Roosevelt was one of the greatest presidents of all time. No amount of evidence will change their perspective about that. Sure. They believe the same thing about Obama or John F. Kennedy. No amount of evidence will change their perspective. And the same is going to be the case with this guy, unfortunately. But I think, look, the Republicans, some of the Republicans who have thrown in their hat with him are going to have to turn around at some point, because I do think Trump's position, I think the Trump MAGA movement is becoming increasingly politically untenable. They're losing backing and they're losing popular force. All that momentum they had in the beginning is now reversing. So it certainly, as a movement, is going to be marginalized. And the Republican Party, if it wants to survive, because it's mostly dead right now, as Billy Crystal said in The Princess Bride, mostly dead. But there are some elements in it that still have, I think, a constitutional conservative bent to them. They're going to jump ship. They're going to jump ship. So I think Trump loses political feasibility before his tenure is up. I don't really think J.D. Vance will be a very much of a contender, to be honest with you, in the upcoming presidential elections, unless something happens to solidify support around him, like some kind of manufactured emergency.
Did you catch the UFC thing at the
Yes,
White House?
I saw the last fight.
Okay. So there's just such a large portion now of the Republican Party that has gone Jerry Springer.
It's true.
That I just don't see that party ever recovering from that. So it seems to me that there's one of two things that can happen. Either the rest of us say, okay, enough with those people, and they become marginalized, or they become the norm. Well, I hope it's not the latter.
Look, I hate to say this again. I said it multiple times when I did an article. I did an interview for the New Yorker in 2016. I predicted the end of the Republican Party with the election of Trump. I didn't think it would happen this way. The good news is, Michael, I think people are so fed up with this duopoly, this loser duopoly, and the way in which the Republicans have turned nationalist Christian and using that as their moral compass, that third parties are starting to spring up. I mean, Yang is starting to, he's formed a party, common sense. There was a common sense movement that sprung up as a result of this. And of course, there's the American Capitalist Party, which I think is the best of them all. I think we're the ones that offer the purest principles and offer the real way forward. If you want to be a real progressive and a real liberal, it's the capitalist ideal that you want to emulate. And the other parties are super, super, super flawed. Common sense is about pragmatism. Yang's party is about universal basic income, which everybody thinks is the wave of the future. Scary, scary, scary propositions, that I don't think make us any better. Hopefully there'll be some folks in the Republican Party, the Rand Pauls of the world, Massey perhaps, that they can turn around and support a party that will be better, I think, better equipped to guard the interests and liberties of the American people. But as far as the Republican Party is concerned, I think it is mostly dead.
Yeah, I'm inclined to think you are correct. I think that they're running on inertia and fumes at this point. And part of it is that the Democrats are just so bad that it's like you don't want to vote for them either. Before we get to the next topic, remember everybody, super chats, super stickers, greatly appreciated. I do want to say one more thing about Trump. I remember in 2016, and somebody said this that I'm not a big fan of. Never really thought he was the best commentator, but after Trump was, it was clear he was going to win, or maybe already won. Bill Kristol, not the one from The Princess Bride, the Irving Kristol's son, he was really upset, and he said, this is not funny. Like, this is serious business. This guy is going to be in charge of serious things. And I don't think that I don't know about most, but first of all, I don't think his fans grasp this at all. And I think a lot of smart people don't even grasp the degree to which this guy does not know what he is doing. Like, he is not a bright guy, and he's not a good guy.
Correct on both counts.
And that is not a good combo. And you've put him in charge of the most important decisions on the planet. Like, the only thing, the first time around, the so-called deep state, I think, largely shielded us. As much as everybody decries the deep state and all that, and I'm not a fan of the administrative state, don't get me wrong, but I think there were a lot of people in there that protected the country from the stupidity and evil of Donald Trump. And he's, by and large, done away with those people. And I think we are just starting to really reap the consequences.
Yeah, Michael, whoever the president is doesn't have to be the smartest guy in the room, but what he does have to have is a set of solid governing principles and a shrewdness with respect to human behavior. Trump has neither. He postures as having both, but to me, one of the most ideal guys that fit this description was Washington. I mean, he was president amongst a generation of giants, intellectual giants. He was not the smartest guy in the room, but he was certainly shrewd, and he had Republican principles behind him, which he followed very closely. And that's what we need now and don't have. You don't have to be the smartest guy in the room. You cannot have command of all the facts as the chief executive of the land, particularly the types of facts that the chief executive of the current United States is supposed to have, which is command of all business and trade and aspects of the world economy. It's impossible, but you can have solid governing principles that enable you to put people in charge to execute those principles properly and for the fiduciary interests of the American people. Greg Lewis says something here, Michael, that I got to agree with, and this occurred to me. I didn't know James Carville said this, but this did occur to me. James Carville is predicting that Donald Trump will resign the presidency before this time next year. This is a repeat of what he said 3 months ago. His money is by Easter. I have that feeling too. I think he's losing political capital like Nixon lost political capital in the 70s. And in the end, he's going to have to resign. Now, he's far more stupid than Nixon. He's far more megalomaniacal than Nixon and grandiose. So he may not be able to read the tea leaves and may try to stick it out. But if Congress turns on the midterm elections, he is fucked.
I am with Ian Gilmore. I don't think Trump resigns. I don't think Trump's ego could handle that.
This is true. That's what I said.
I really don't. I don't think like this is a guy who never admits when he loses, ever.
Yes,
never. And I just don't see that occurring. It's possible. I mean, I don't know because of the people that he's surrounded himself with. I think they're going to get shellacked in the fall, but it won't be enough to get him out by impeachment. So
you still think it's to me, if the House turns Democrat, they're going to go for articles of impeachment, but you don't think he'll be convicted in the Senate? He may be the first modern president to be convicted by the Senate. That's how bad the political capital is going right now. Well,
he would have to have people would really need to turn on him. And what I mean is his people, the base, the strength, the power in the Republican Party. I suppose it's possible if the thing. What I'm thinking is if the other wackos in the party, the Tucker Carlsons in those guys, gain ascendance, then it's certainly possible. But that they would impeach him and convict. But I don't think so.
So Randy says Congress will turn. I have a feeling it will too. Shame it's towards Dems and not independents. Now, here's the thing, Michael, that I perceive in the Democratic Party, and anybody out there, please write your opinion on this because I want your opinion. The Democrats are searching for a moral center as well. Many of them are, and especially in the younger generation, are turning towards democratic socialism, with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez being, sort of the banner for that world. But there's also an abundance movement within the Democratic Party that is fiscally conservative, socially liberal, and understands that we need capitalism in order to be an abundant, thriving society, and they are seeking abundance. There's a larger portion, however, Michael, that are in the degrowth movement, and they are also aligned with the Democratic Socialists, along with the Thomas Piketty's of the world, who think that, what we should do is actually take our gross domestic product from 3% to 0 or 0.5%, without understanding that literally means killing people. It literally means you will make resources so inaccessible to human beings that we will fall back multiple generations in wealth, and that literally means death for millions of human beings. This is not, this is not me exaggerating, Michael. So there's a schism in the Democratic Party, and you're seeing it in particular parts of the South where Democrats they seem to look more like 80s and 90s Republicans than the Democrats that are in the Northeast and the upper Atlantic states there. And this schism is something interesting that I think the American Capitalist Party could use for its advantage, because I think the liberals are going to jump ship and the no growths and social democrats are going to take one side, and people who are inclined towards liberty, constitutional restraints, and capitalism will have to be on the other. That's the only real solution there is, Michael. You can only run government one of two ways, either through a collectivist ethics or an individualist ethics, and there's no marrying the two.
Never the twain shall meet. Well, now, this American Capitalist Party, does it have a position? I don't think so, but maybe we ought to get ahead of the curve. But you and I can talk about this central bank digital currency stuff.
Yes, I can say right off the bat, we don't have a specific policy with respect to that, but we should. We are against, of course, central bank digital currencies. We're against modern monetary theory. I'm against fiat currencies. I love the idea of money being tied to something tangible, Michael, because when it's tied to something tangible, it not only restrains government spending, but it also affords you the capacity of control over your own life, because the money is property. It's your property, and it comes under the protections of property in the United States, not just a medium of exchange, right? It has value also in and of itself. And the thing with central bank digital currency, which is being experimented with now by 100+ countries right now, Michael, all of their currencies are in the shitter, and they're all looking for a way to hide that fact. First, it was modern monetary theory that claims if you're the monopoly producer of money, you don't have to worry about debt. Of course, they can throw all the graphs up in the world, but you do have to worry about debt. It doesn't matter what they say. And taxing all the money out of the system to control the deficit or control interest rates, it doesn't bode well for the average citizen. The central bank currency literally means the central bank and the government will have control over your spending, because they can program into the digital currency what you can spend your money on.
Right. So Greg Lewis asked an interesting question. He says being against the central bank makes their stance on digital currency.
You just went out for me, Michael.
How about now?
Loud.
Too loud?
Yeah.
And how about now?
That's better.
All right. So Greg Lewis says being against the central bank makes their stance on digital currency a moot point. Yes? I don't think so. And I'll tell you why. Because, for instance, I would rather have a gold standard than a central bank. I would rather have a central bank that's not controlled by President Trump than one that is controlled by President Trump. And I would rather have a central bank that prints money than one that has control over what you spend your money on and can track you based on where you spend your money. So, yes, I think it does imply, if you're against the central bank, it does imply you would be opposed to the digital currency, the central bank digital currency. That doesn't mean I don't think that you can't speak specifically, or that you shouldn't speak specifically against this. This is something that has not really been on my radar, I'll be honest. I haven't done a ton of reading, but I think like something like more like 99% of countries have done some experimenting. It's an awful lot of countries that have really taken a solid look at this or have tried it. America, we are not, and haven't done it yet. I'm not in any way, shape, or form for this. I think that this is orders of magnitude worse than printed currency.
Absolutely. And Michael, we saw what can happen when the government controls your currency. When the truckers up in Canada were protesting the government's policies with respect to COVID, and Trudeau put the freeze on all of their accounts and literally blocked them out of their own livelihoods. So this is what the government can do if it doesn't like your spending habits. Let's say we get a government that's inhabited by social democrats who want to enforce green style living on you. Well, then anything that, if you're spending too much money at the pump, it can prevent you from now buying gasoline. It can prevent you from spending money on things that it considers to be increasing your carbon footprint. Whatever happens to be the fad of the day that the government governing parasitic political class claims will save America or save the world, they will determine that policy through your spending habits, right? They're gonna manipulate your spending habits to theirs. And especially, Michael, if they see your spending habits are like on books with respect to liberty, free markets, and they don't like that because it, of course, undermines their capacity to rule you, they could prohibit those. They could prohibit your spending on Amazon. They could prohibit your spending across the board. Your money is your power, folks. And the further it goes away from some tangible thing in the world, the more it becomes just a keystroke, the more it becomes a figment of somebody's imagination, the worse off it is for you. The worse it is for you. So I would distrust this stuff. It's not progress. It's progress for the state's control of your life, but certainly not progress for us, and certainly not going to further the cause of liberty, which I think is our primary goal here as capitalists, promoting these ideals.
So Megan Ribbons asks, does the Capitalist Party platform include prohibition of deficit spending, insist on a gold standard, emancipate education? I quite frankly don't remember. I was just trying to find it real quickly.
Well, we do want free market education. I think that's explicit in it. We do have an eye towards the gold standard, but understand that going from fiat currency to a gold standard with this $37 trillion debt and an economy super enmeshed in central banking is going to be very difficult. But our ideal is free banking, of course. And deficit spending, we think, is a moot point when the government's only responsibility is the courts, the police, and the army. It's such a tiny portion of the gross domestic product and such a tiny portion of comparatively what we pay today in taxes that there would be no deficits for that. There couldn't be deficits for that. Additionally, taxes would be raised by subscription. They would be raised by lottery. They would be voluntary, and there are various ways in which that could be enacted. But we're a long ways from that, guys, because we are in a deficit crisis at the moment. We are going to go over the cliff sooner rather than later. Michael, they've just projected that Social Security is going to go over the cliff by 2033, somewhere in there. I'm certainly not going to receive Social Security benefits when I'm retiring because it's going to become insolvent literally the day I reach retirement age, Michael.
So, Mark, I'm just looking, and it doesn't appear that it's specifically the educational stances on the platform. I just gave it a quick glance, but there is the separation of state and economics. Ultimately, the principles of the party and individual rights imply private education, imply that the government's not deficit spending, and imply a gold standard. I think it actually implies free banking more than anything else. I think would be the better way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, free banking would mean a competition in currency, which is something that would be super hard to transition to now, Michael. Now that the dollar is the base currency of trade in the world, it's a hard thing.
Well, that's it's funny because the other day I went to a debate about ICE. And Brian Kaplan was one of the debaters. Brian's an anarchist. So somebody asked him at the party, the after party, hey, are you an anarchist? He says, yes, but not one of the crazy ones. Right? So somebody asked him.
How do you pull that off?
Well, somebody says, well, what do you mean by that? He said, well, there's some people out there that just think that you could just abolish the government in total right now. And he said that would just, basically that'd be an utter disaster. Like you couldn't fathom what would happen. And while obviously I'm not an anarchist, I do agree with the sentiment.
Sure.
That there's the ideal that you want to reach for, and ours is limited constitutional government, free market capitalism, but it's also the path to get there, right? So, for instance, while my end goal would be private education, no government involvement at any stage, if you just transition to that right now, you would throw so many kids out of the school system that I think it is a potential disaster. The challenge is to figure out how to do it in the best way, protecting rights and get there in the best way. And I think it's the same for the gold standard, to be quite honest.
Yeah, for sure. Look, I mean, if you were to make education a private enterprise, it would enable innovation to finally enter into that business. I don't even think brick and mortar schools would be that necessary anymore, Michael, if that kind of innovation were allowed to come into schooling. I mean, right now you could get a college level education for hundreds of dollars, not tens of thousands of dollars, but hundreds of dollars. And that's now. Without a free market, there are professors who are considered the greatest professors in the world. They're award-winning professors who give courses in their specialty, like in the Great Books Club and the Great Courses Club that you can get from various think tanks. That you can literally get a college level education for nothing. You can learn an entire language from apps that costs you $5 a month. I mean, you can do this. It's possible today. So there's no reason why a free market in education, with the evolution of AI, with quantum computing, with amazing things that are happening to technology, why it can't happen sooner rather than later, and why the transition can't be a little bit more smooth. It can't be all at once, for sure, because people have to make plans for these kinds of things. They need time to do that, but it can certainly happen faster. But Michael, we should probably spend some time on Mr. Mason.
Mr. Mason was his father. We're talking about George. No, just kidding. Bad joke. I'm entitled to make a bad joke every once in a while. I'm pretty
Not really.
But it can certainly happen faster.
What's that?
Nothing. Never mind.
Ignore the man behind the curtain.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. I accidentally hit our feed, and it
All
came
right.
up.
Well, at least you got the feed on. So George Mason was a Virginia planter. Very active during the revolutionary times. He wrote the Virginia Declaration of Rights, was instrumental in getting the Virginia Constitution. But I mean, the impact that this guy had on, for instance, the Declaration of Independence, very strong. I mean, some of the language is almost verbatim. Let me see if I can't scroll over to it. I got to make sure that I don't do what you just did, because that was pretty embarrassing for you. I don't want to.
I'm used to it, though, Michael. I'm used to it. Being embarrassed. It's what I do. Well, actually, you know what? Stella Adler said the one thing actors shouldn't have is a faculty of shame. You should not have any shame as an actor. So I'm almost never embarrassed. Just want to let you know.
So he was on the Committee of Safety in 1776, drafted the state constitution. His Declaration of Rights was the first authoritative formulation of the doctrine of inalienable rights. He let me see if I can't pull this up here. Oh, they're just giving me the definition of the word, which I already know what it means.
I can get you the Virginia Declaration open, the preamble that's very close to.
That's what I'm looking for.
In fact, Michael, I like it a little better, and I'll tell you why after I read. I'm going to read it out loud to people.
All right.
So all men are by nature equally free and independent. I love that. And have certain inherent rights of which, when they enter into a state of society, they cannot by any compact deprive or divest their posterity, namely the enjoyment of life and liberty, with the means of acquiring and possessing property and pursuing and obtaining happiness and safety. Michael, that is super, super clear language.
Yes. So Ian Gilmore says that Reason had a George Mason article today. Are your founder discussions being prompted by Reason? This one, yes. I had planned on discussing George Mason anyway, as part of the people that we're discussing. But then it happened to come across my feed today, that article from Reason on George Mason. So I said, well, today's as good a day as any to talk about him. So he also was instrumental in getting the Bill of Rights for the United States, because he would not sign on to the Constitution. He never actually agreed to sign on to it, but he opposed it because of, amongst other reasons, that it lacked a Bill of Rights. So not only did he inspire the Declaration of Independence, but also was instrumental in getting the Bill of Rights attached to the United States Constitution.
Yeah, you know, Michael, this is one of those arguments where both sides have a claim to right, which is also a good way to write stories, by the way. You should write stories where both sides have a claim to right. And like, I think Madison's early arguments against a Bill of Rights were that, well, the government has no power that isn't explicitly declared in the Constitution. But it was Hamilton that won the day with implied powers.
Well, he won the day with implied powers after he said that there weren't.
After he said that there weren't, correct. But, you know, Madison thought there wasn't even a need for it because the government had no more powers than were explicitly enumerated in the Constitution. He's right. He's right. Unfortunately, that's not the way human beings work, and they need guarantees. And the Bill of Rights was a fantastic addition to the Constitution for us. And now, even now, Michael, 250 years after the Bill of Rights came to us, a little less than 250 years after the Bill of Rights came to us, because they came to us in 1791, they are being fought tooth and nail by modern politicians who do not like even the First Amendment, which has been held sacrosanct by pretty much every side of the political spectrum, is now in doubt. It's in doubt, Michael.
Yeah.
For us.
I I've struggled with this when reading the Anti-Federalists, I think that the what became known as the Federalists had a much, and this is seems to be marked the case with most things, right? Their critique of the Articles of Confederation, very apt.
Sure.
And that's the problem. It's very easy to point out what's wrong in certain places.
Mm-hmm.
It's much more difficult to find the solution. So the critique of the Articles of Confederation, spot on. But then once you try to replace it, then a lot of the problems come about. Do you need a Bill of Rights? Well, how are you going to get this thing enacted when you're dealing with, half the country are slaveholders, not slaveholders, slave states, I should say, the southern states. How are you going to get this thing enacted? What about the judiciary? Does the judiciary have the right to review the Constitution? Are you going to have one executive or two? Are the branches going to check each other? Do you need a bicameral legislature, or are you just going to have one branch? I mean, it's not an easy task. And when that came about, I think a lot of the anti-federalist critiques were very strong. That, the necessary and proper clause, for instance, they knew what was going to come from that. They understood that the Constitution they're ultimately going to be reading things into it that aren't there. They were right about that. They were right that it lacked a Bill of Rights. So, but by and large, I think we got, for the time, a damn good document. That came from people like, that impacted by men like George Mason, who opposed it.
Amen. And it's a document that has been more or less negated over the past 150 years, probably from the outset, Michael, but certainly from the progressive era on. There has been a concerted intellectual attack and political attack against the Constitution of the United States. And now it's become mainstream. Now, I think we have a world educated in postmodernist philosophy that thinks everything that you get handed to you is a result of a power structure, that the principles aren't really principles that are reducible to reality or even reflect reality. They just reflect the will of the people in power. And it's time to overturn those power structures for something else. And this is what has, I think, guided largely the destruction of constitutional government. Michael, when you have objectivists themselves getting on our case because we stick to the Constitution, because we think the Constitution is a decent document with certainly flaws that need to be amended, but that its primary purpose is to restrain government action and to maintain the liberties of individuals within the United States, that we think that they're calling us naive for wanting to stick to that. And they want to go off, free-form pragmatism to do what they want because it's expedient at the moment. That's scary, man.
It is. Not that I wouldn't love to get into a vehement critique of Razi, because believe me, I'm up for it, but I'd rather not right now. I'd rather get back. Let me move back just a little bit. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I was going to read the important principles that were set forth in the Declaration of Rights that he wrote that have a resounding influence on Americans even to this day, but certainly influenced Thomas Jefferson and the creation of the Constitution. And there's going to be 6 of them. That all power is derived from the people and that government officials are their trustees and servants. I love that. This is certainly not the way the government acts now. That no government official is entitled to hereditary office. That the legislative, executive, and judicial branches of government should be separate from one another. Love that. That's certainly not what's going on now. That the freedom of the press is a bulwark of liberty. Of course, this is certainly not what's going on now. The free exercise of religion is a right to which all are entitled. This is correct, but of course the Christian nationalists are seeking to impose Christian values in the education system and reinstitute prayer in public schools. They're using the public sphere to try to revise history and to inculcate the American people with their Christian values. I'm opposed to that. That's not what free exercise of religion is, and that standing armies in time of peace should be avoided as dangerous to liberty. At all times, the military should be under civilian control. Love that. Not sure that the civilian in control of who is the chief executive and the commander in chief, is qualified to control the military. But certainly the fact that Congress has the power to declare war puts the military soundly in the hands of the people, which is fantastic. I don't necessarily think standing armies are a threat to us, Michael. I think they could be necessary in modern times, but it's scary when they become a tool for whatever party happens to be in power. That's for sure.
Yeah. Also, it's important to note that George Mason was, if this is such an interesting thing, and he was vehemently opposed to slavery, vehemently opposed to it, thought it was an abomination, thought it was a stain on the country, thought it was a corruption of white culture, that it made monsters out of everybody. So that's great. That shows that a lot of the founders held that view. He also held slaves that he didn't free, which, is a stain on his legacy. But by and large, I think that his legacy is a good one.
It is, and unfortunately, he was right in predicting what a scourge slavery would be. Not only at the time, and not only, but to future generations, Michael, who would look at slavery, the contradiction of slavery, and use that to impugn the founders' motives and the principles themselves. And that just goes to show you, folks, full integrity is what matters. It means when you have a principle, you have to stick to it. Unfortunately, Michael, at the time, the people that did stick to that principle, when they gave up their slaves, that usually meant financial and social ruin to them. And this was something that most of the founders were neither willing nor able to sustain at the time. Unfortunately, they put that practicality in front of their principles, but certainly men who did release their enslaved populations, not only were they ostracized socially and politically, they lost their fortunes. And there was a friend of Thomas Jefferson's who experienced that, and I think Thomas Jefferson saw that as a warning sign that it would be extremely dangerous for him to do that. Additionally, Michael, a lot of these folks understood that they were releasing into the population people unfit to live within the population, also not accepted by the population, and felt that gradual emancipation was going to be the way of the future. They understood, like us, that when something is institutionalized and calcifies in society, it's super hard to get out immediately. Yeah. As horrible as it is, you simply just can't cut the cancer out immediately without killing the host. And the founders understood that, and unfortunately, it inhibited most of them from doing something about this slave problem.
All right. So yesterday I asked who would the audience like to see as co-hosts if Mark or Jim were unavailable. Mr. Deagle says Nikos is always great. Yes, he is. I don't know how available he would be. He's got very different hours from us, but he's somebody I could reach out to. Nicole Hingle votes for Robert Naser, which I would love to have him. On the very next comment, Robert says, I'd be tempted to nominate myself, but I don't know that I could fit it into my schedule. So I don't know if he could actually do it. Randy says Jonathan Honig, Sonny Loman. I don't think I could stomach Sonny Loman. I'm just gonna be honest with you.
I don't know who that is.
Oh, I don't think I could do it. I don't know. Daniel T. Richards, I don't know. Justin Lesniewski, don't know him either. Don Watkins or Yaron Brook, I don't think either of them are stepping up. I said let's be realistic.
Euron is busy with his own podcast, and now he's in partnership with Nikos, which makes both of those guys hard to nab. And Don Watkins is doing his own thing as well.
Yeah. Greg Lewis says random audience volunteers. Yes, and I'm very, very interested in that as well, Greg. All right, Mark, it's your turn. Capitalist thought of the day.
Hey, look, we talked about George Mason, and we're going to bring up founders, I think, most days until the 250th anniversary of the founding of this country. And I think it's important that we get back to the principles that they bequeathed to us, which is the greatest inheritance in civilization, Michael. And that is That is the inheritance of liberty, and the idea of a constitutionally restrained government whose responsibility is to the people, meaning to protect their rights and property and nothing more. That's what a capitalist society is, a society where the government protects property and your right to free movement, to exchange with people and associate as you see fit. That is what capitalism is. It is a completely voluntary society, free association, free exchange with people to mutual benefit or on your own terms that nobody can interfere with. We think that is what creates a truly benevolent society, Michael, because no one's living has had it at the expense of somebody else. And everybody understands that the trader principle means that you exchange with each other to mutual benefit. So let's get back to that. Let's reinvigorate the founders' primary principles, because we need those in a day and age of budding tyranny and cults of personality.
Awesome. My question for the audience is, what's the word I'm looking for? It is a very self-interested question for me, but it could also be good for you guys. Who do you think would be a good Whom do you think?
Too loud.
You know what happens? The mic disconnects and then I come through the computer.
Copy that.
Okay. So what I was going to say is that whom would be a good person for me to debate on this show? Mind you, make it somebody realistic. Like, I mean, I'm not going to be able to get JD Vance up here. So make it realistic. I would love to know whom you would like to see me debate. That's the question. Please go to YouTube and answer it.
All right, folks, you got 23 hours to check your premises. You know that's my favorite thing to do, and it should be yours as well. It keeps you active-minded and super smart. So please remember, check your premises. We'll see you tomorrow. Peace.